There are two kinds of quiet daughters in every house. The ones whose silence is obedience, and the ones whose silence is memory. Most parents can't tell the difference. Not until the morning comes when a folder gets pushed across the kitchen table, and their daughter lifts her eyes real slow and something in the room shifts forever. Something cracks right down the middle. And the mother, the one who thought she had it all worked out, suddenly understands with a cold and terrible clarity exactly which kind of daughter she raised. My name is Avery Cole. I had just turned 18. And by 9:15 the very next morning, my mom was sliding a manila folder across our kitchen table like it was a plate of birthday eggs. She was smiling that big, warm smile she saves for church potlucks and parent-teacher conferences. She said, "Honey, now that you're 18, we really should talk about Grandpa's money." My blood went cold. She had absolutely no idea I already knew everything. But before I take you into that kitchen, hit like and subscribe. Genuinely helps more than you know. Drop your city and what time it is where you're at right now in the comments. I read every single one. Let me take you all the way back. Because this story doesn't start at that breakfast table. It starts 5 months earlier on a Thursday evening in January in my bedroom. January 5 months before. Ohio January. Kind where the sky is the exact color of old dishwater, the driveway is salted white, and the forced air heat in our house runs so hard it dries out your nose. I was cleaning my room, not because I wanted to, but because my mom had announced that Derek's business contacts were coming over on Saturday and the house needed to look presentable. On the top shelf of my closet, tucked behind a stack of old yearbooks and a box of dried-out markers, sat Grandpa Raymond's memory box. Walnut wood, brass hinges, a small latch that had gone green at the edges from years of being touched. He'd given it to me on my 17th birthday. The last birthday he was alive for. I hadn't opened it in almost a year. The latch gave a soft click. Inside, a crayon drawing I'd made him when I was 7, a house with a lopsided yellow sun, a photograph of him and Grandma Louise at their 40th wedding anniversary, her laughing so hard her eyes disappeared, him looking at her like she was the only light in the room. And beneath all of it, a white envelope. Heavy. Sealed. On the front, in Grandpa Raymond's careful slanted cursive, "Open only if something feels wrong with your mother before your 18th birthday. Call James Caldecott immediately." I sat down on the edge of my bed. I didn't open it right then. I just held it, turned it over and over, stared at his handwriting until my eyes went blurry around the edges. Grandpa Raymond had been gone for almost 2 years, and he had known. He had known enough, while he still had the strength to hold a pen, while he still had time, to write a warning, seal it in an envelope, and trust that I would find it before it was too late. Downstairs, I could hear my mom's voice. Low. Measured. Kind of low you use when you don't want to be heard but you're not quite whispering either. Derek's voice underneath hers, lower still. Kitchen light was on at 11 at night. My mom had told me she was going to bed at 9:30. I put the envelope back in the box. I closed the latch. I went downstairs, poured myself a glass of water, said goodnight like everything was fine, and went back up to my room. I didn't sleep much. That envelope was the first time someone had handed me a real weapon. I just didn't fully understand what I was holding yet. Before any of this, who we were. My dad's name was Stephen Cole. He drove a black Chevy pickup and ran logistics for a regional grocery distributor out of Millhaven. He was the kind of man who fixed things without being asked. A squeaky door, a busted gutter downspout, a kid crying outside a gas station who dropped her snow cone. He just quietly fixed things and moved on. When I was 11, he drove to a warehouse 3 hours away and never came home. Icy overpass on Route 40, a semi that jackknifed on the wrong side of the center line, and a state trooper at our front door on a February morning with his eyes red at the corners and his hat in his hands. My mom cried for 6 days straight. On the 7th, she started calling realtors about the kitchen. She married Derek Pruitt 2 years later. He owned a commercial landscaping company, big green trucks, a crew of 12 yard signs all over town. Kind of man who kept his business card in his front pocket and shook every hand in every room. He had a daughter from his first marriage named Brooke, 2 years younger than me, who moved into the bedroom across the hall with her swim trophies and a poster of the Eiffel Tower. I figured out the rules of our new house real fast. Rule 1: my mom didn't like tears. If I cried, she called it drama. She'd exhale long and slow and go find something to reorganize in another room. Rule 2: she didn't like loud joy either. If I laughed too hard at dinner, she'd cut me a look and say, inside voice Avery. The only setting she approved of was flat, calm, and cooperative. So by the time I was 13, I had stopped spending my feelings anywhere near her. I saved them for Grandpa Raymond's back porch, for Grandma Louise's kitchen, for whatever book I happened to be hiding in at the time. My mom thought my quiet meant I was obedient. It didn't. My quiet meant I was watching. My quiet meant I was filing things away for later. There's a thing that happens to kids who grow up in houses where emotions are treated like a budget. You learn to run a deficit. You stop spending. You hoard. And by the time you're 17, sitting on your bed holding a sealed envelope from your dead grandfather, you've built up a reserve nobody knows about. Grandma Louise and Grandpa Raymond. Grandma Louise died when I was 13. Ovarian cancer. She fought it twice, and the second time it hit harder and faster and didn't leave much room for fighting back. She held my hand the afternoon she passed and told me I was a good girl and that nobody could ever take that from me, not ever. I didn't cry in the hospital room. I cried in the passenger seat of Grandpa's old Buick in the parking garage afterward, and he didn't shush me or tell me to pull myself together. He just put one hand on the back of my head and said, "Let it out, Bertie. That's what it's there for." Called me Bertie. Always had. Said I had a habit of landing on things quietly and taking everything in before anyone even noticed I was there. He made it 2 more years after Grandma Louise. Got quieter, not sadder. Spent his mornings on the back porch with his coffee, watching a pair of mourning doves that showed up every single morning like they had a standing appointment with him. He passed on a Wednesday, age 74, sitting in his recliner with the TV on low and a library book open in his lap. Peaceful. Exactly the way he lived. The will was read 3 weeks after the funeral. There was a trust. My name on it. A number that made Derek's jaw do something strange, like he'd been punched somewhere the bruise wouldn't show. Roughly $740,000. Blue chip stock, some cash, and the proceeds from a piece of commercial land Grandpa had quietly sold 2 years before he died. In a suburb of Columbus that had since exploded with development he must have seen coming from miles away. Terms were plain as a handshake. The assets were mine. I couldn't touch the principal until my 18th birthday. On that date, June 3rd, full and complete ownership transferred to me. Trustee named in the documents was a man called James Caldecott, out of Columbus. And at the bottom of the trustee letter, in Grandpa's own handwriting, 8 words. Your choice. Your life. I believe in you. Grandpa. My mom read those 8 words with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Not grief. Not pride. Something colder. The slow, quiet turning of gears behind her eyes, trying to figure out the angles. Grandpa left me a door. My mother had already started looking for a locksmith. The man with the gray briefcase and Mr. Ellis. Around November, about 7 months before my birthday, a man started showing up at our house. Wednesdays. Around 4:30. Same silver Camry in the driveway every week, with a bumper sticker for a Springfield law firm, Harmon Legal Group. He always carried a gray leather briefcase that looked expensive in the way things look expensive when someone is trying harder than necessary. He stayed about an hour. He always left with the briefcase a little fuller than when he arrived. My mom called him an insurance consultant the first week, financial planner the second, colleague of Derek's the third. The story changed. The briefcase didn't. And then there was Mr. Ellis. He taught AP Government at Millhaven High, late 40s, the same corduroy blazer 3 days a week, always nursing a gas station coffee that was already half gone by first period. He was the only teacher who ever stopped me in the hallway just to say, "Avery, you think faster than you let on. That's worth protecting." The time, I didn't know what he meant. A few days after I found the cedar box, I was still in early January, still replaying what I'd heard from the kitchen. Mr. Ellis pulled me aside at the end of class. He slid a book across the corner of his desk like it wasn't a big deal. Know Your Rights, Estate Law and Inheritance for Young Adults. A library copy, beaten up, somebody's dog-eared notes in the margins. He said, "Your grandfather mentioned you to me once at a community meeting a few years back. Said his granddaughter was sharp and he hoped she'd have what she needed when the time came. I'm not sure what's going on in your house, Avery, but this might help you ask the right questions." I took it. I read the entire thing in 4 days. And when I got to the chapter on fiduciary duty and the rights of trust beneficiaries, something clicked into place. I understood exactly what was sitting on my closet shelf inside a sealed white envelope. And I understood why my grandfather had written what he wrote on the front of it. The mudroom moment. Late January. A Thursday afternoon. My shift at the public library got cut short. A pipe had burst in the back reference room and they were sending everyone home early. I came in through our mudroom door, stomping snow off my boots, and heard voices carrying from the kitchen. My mom, once she signs it, the rest is just paperwork. Derek, what if she actually reads it first? My mom, and I will never, as long as I live, forget this, laughed. Short. Flat. She said, "Derek, it's Avery. She'll sign." I stood in that mudroom for maybe 15 seconds with my hand on the door, my heart going hard in my chest, my wet boots making puddles on the mat. Then I opened the door loud and called out, "Hey!" Pipe burst at the library, sent us all home early. I heard paper sweep across a surface. Fast. When I walked into the kitchen, my mom was at the sink rinsing a mug she'd clearly already rinsed. Table was completely clear. Derek was leaning against the counter with his phone. Brooke was at the island with her homework, completely unbothered. But on the counter, half tucked under my mom's purse, the corner of a cream-colored folder peeked out. The letterhead read, "Harmon Legal Group, Family Wealth Planning." My mom turned and smiled like she'd been waiting for me all afternoon. "Avery, you want some hot chocolate? It's brutal out there." I said, "Sure, Mom. Thanks." I took the mug. I went upstairs. I sat on my bed with both hands around the warm ceramic and just sat there. That was the moment I stopped being the daughter who didn't know. I just didn't tell a single soul that I'd crossed over. The envelope. I opened it the following Saturday morning. I walked to Mill Creek Greenway, a little park on the edge of town with a half-frozen creek running through it and a handful of picnic benches nobody used in January, with the envelope in the front pocket of my hoodie. I sat on the bench farthest from the parking lot. The sky was the color of old nickels. I slit the seal with my thumbnail. 1 page. Grandpa Raymond's handwriting. "Birdie, if you're reading this, something has gone sideways with your mother. I've suspected it for a long time. I never wanted to poison you against her. But I couldn't leave this world without giving you a door to open. James Caldecott has been my attorney for more than 20 years. He knows everything. He's been waiting for your call. You have every right to protect yourself. You have every right to choose your own life. I believe you will choose well. Grandpa." Below, in careful block letters, a Columbus area code phone number. I sat with it for a while. My hands were cold. My eyes were not wet. I took out my phone. I dialed. A woman answered. "Caldecott Estate Law, this is Renee." I said, "Hi. My name is Avery Cole. My grandfather was Raymond Cole. He left me a number and told me to call James Caldecott." Half a second of quiet. Then, softly, "Hold on one moment, sweetheart." Click. Then a voice, warm even, the kind of voice that has spent decades delivering hard truths in a way that doesn't knock people over. Avery, this is James Caldecott. I have been expecting your call for quite some time. I couldn't find words for a full beat. He said, your grandfather and I spoke about this possibility many, many times. I'm glad you found the letter. Can you come to Columbus next week? Tell your mother it's a financial aid appointment for college. I said yes. He said good. And Avery, I need you to do something important until then. Don't change a single thing at home. Not your face, not your schedule, not a word to anyone. Can you do that? I said I can. For the first time in a long time, someone was trusting me with the whole truth. And that, right there, that cracked something open in my chest that I hadn't even known was sealed shut. Columbus. Caldecott's office was on the third floor of a brick building just off High Street in downtown Columbus. Dark wood walls, a shelf of Ohio statute books floor to ceiling, a window looking out on a small courtyard where the fountain had been shut off for winter. He stood up when I walked in. Early 60s. Silver hair, wire-rimmed glasses, a handshake that was firm without trying to prove it. He walked me through everything slowly. He wrote terms on a legal pad so I could see them in plain English while he spoke. Trust structures, fiduciary duty, beneficial interest, irrevocable versus revocable arrangements. He didn't talk down to me. He talked to me. He said, at midnight on your 18th birthday, Avery, everything your grandfather left you is fully and legally yours. You have 3 choices. Leave the existing trust structure alone. Dissolve it entirely. Or rebuild it into something new. Something designed specifically by you for you with my help today. I said, what do you recommend? He said, a new irrevocable trust. Corporate trustee, I work with a firm called Cornerstone Trust Management right here in Columbus. You are the sole beneficiary. Distributions are authorized for education, housing, medical, and living expenses. Your mother, Derek Pruitt, and Brooke Pruitt are permanently excluded from any trustee or beneficiary role. I said irrevocable. That means I can't undo it. He said correct. Not even you. That is the entire point. Protects you from outside pressure, and honestly, it also protects you from yourself. 5 years from now, if your mother cries the right way and says the right things, you will not have the legal power to dismantle this. That protection is by design. I thought about that. I thought about my mom's voice in the kitchen. It's Avery. She'll sign. I said, let's do it. He nodded slowly. Then he looked up and said, before we go further, there's something you need to know about the attorney your mother has been working with. Conrad Harmon. Caldecott folded his hands on the desk. He said, the man showing up at your house on Wednesday afternoons is Conrad Harmon. He operates a small firm out of Springfield. The Ohio State Bar has reprimanded him twice, once for improperly steering a client's estate into a family-controlled LLC, once for filing documents with falsified execution dates. I said, what does he do for people like my mom? Caldecott said, he drafts agreements that most ethical attorneys would refuse to touch. He slid a folder halfway across the desk. I could read the cover page upside down. Cole Family Financial Integration Agreement. Avery Marie Cole, Principal Beneficiary. He said, a paralegal who recently left Harmon's firm had serious concerns about what she was being asked to type. She forwarded a draft to 2 colleagues as a whistleblower. One of those colleagues contacted me. I said, what does the document actually do? He said, it would name you as co-trustee alongside your mother. It would grant her durable financial power of attorney over your inherited assets. And it would assign roughly 60% of your beneficial interest to a new LLC called Pruitt Cole Family Holdings. He let me read. Right there on page 5 in plain black ink, a signature line dated April 1st. My 18th birthday was June 3rd. April 1st was 2 full months before I turned 18. 2 full months while I was still legally a minor in the state of Ohio. I looked up. I said, I'd still be 17 when they want me to sign this. He said, yes. Your mother's signature as your legal guardian would appear alongside yours. That's how it was designed. Get you to sign, while she still has legal authority over you, before the trust releases to your independent control. I set the folder down carefully. My hands were steady. That actually surprised me. I said, "How long has this been in the works?" He said, "The first draft is dated last September. The version I'm looking at is the third." I sat with that. September. 3 versions in 3 months. For months of my mother sitting across from me at the dinner table asking if I wanted seconds, buying my favorite shampoo, reminding me, "Closer to your birthday, honey," while Conrad Harmon in Springfield was on the other end of the phone refining the language. I said, "Let's build something they can't get to." Caldecott looked at me for a long moment. Then, quietly, he said, "That is exactly what your grandfather hoped you would say. Building the Louise Trust. We named it right there in his office." He said most people name trusts after themselves. He asked what I wanted to call it. I said the Louise Trust. After Grandma Louise. The woman who held my hand on the worst afternoon of my life and told me I was good when goodness felt like something I couldn't afford. He wrote it down without asking why. I appreciated that. We built it across 3 more meetings over the next 2 months, always with a cover story, always careful not to change a single thing at home. College advisor session. A financial aid seminar I'd supposedly found online. Campus tour I drove to alone. At home I kept my face exactly where it always was. I passed the mashed potatoes. I asked about Derek's spring landscaping contracts. I helped Brooke study for her chemistry exam on a Tuesday night and watched her fall asleep on the couch with her notes on her chest. None of them knew a single thing. The Louise Trust Structure, Corporate Trustee, Cornerstone Trust Management, Columbus, Ohio, 29-year clean record. Sole beneficiary, Avery Marie Cole and any direct descendants in perpetuity. Permanently excluded from any trustee or beneficiary role forever, Diane Pruitt, Derek Allen Pruitt, Brooke Marie Pruitt, and any entity in which any of the 3 held equity. Distributions authorized for tuition, reasonable housing, medical costs, and emergency living expenses. A spendthrift clause. No creditor could attach to it, no outside party could pressure me into a lump sum withdrawal for their benefit. Irrevocable. No amendment. No termination. No reversal. Caldecott said, "I want you to fully understand what you're committing to. This protects you from them. And it also protects you from yourself, from a weak moment 5 years from now." A lot of 18-year-olds don't really grasp that second part. I said I do. He said I know. That's what makes this conversation different from most I have. We set the live execution for midnight, June 3rd, notary standing by, Cornerstone on standby, confirmation call scheduled for 9 the following morning. He said, "It's your moment, Avery. Use it the way you need to." Aunt Jenna. 3 days after my second meeting with Caldecott, my Aunt Jenna called me out of nowhere. Or, looking back, maybe not out of nowhere at all. She said, "Avery, it's me. You got a few minutes?" I stepped out onto the back porch. The air smelled like wet earth and early spring. She said, "I heard from James Caldecott that you reached out to him. He didn't tell me what about. I think I already know." Aunt Jenna was my dad's younger sister. Our nurse in Cleveland, 47 years old, direct as a scalpel, the kind of woman who didn't waste words because she'd seen too many people run out of time. She and my dad had been as close as 2 people could be. She and my mom had not been close since roughly the 2nd year of my parents' marriage. She said, "Avery, I owe you something. An apology, actually. I should have said this a long time ago." I sat down on the porch step. She said, "About 8 months before your dad's accident, he tried to set up a trust for you. He wanted me as a co-trustee. He had already spoken to an attorney and was ready to file." Something clenched inside my chest. She said, "Your mom found out. She cried for 3 days without stopping. Told your dad it was a betrayal. Said it proved he didn't trust her. He caved. Changed everything back. Left it all to her, the house, the life insurance, all of it. About $480,000 when you add it together. I said, I found the original paperwork when I was 16. In a box in the attic. Long quiet. She said, honey, you are not the first one she's worked on. You're just the one who had a grandfather smart enough and loving enough to plan 2 years ahead. I didn't cry. I genuinely wanted to. I held it. She said, if you need somewhere to land after your birthday, I have a spare room in Cleveland. I have a ridiculous cat named Winston who judges everyone with complete impartiality. And I make excellent coffee. You are welcome for as long as you need. I said, Aunt Jenna, what day is it there? She laughed, surprised and soft. Thursday, same as you. I said, I think I might take you up on that room. The dinner before the birthday. A few days before my birthday, my mom announced a celebration dinner at Millhaven Country Club. I had not agreed to this. It had simply been announced. 17 people. Pastor Greg and his wife Marlene. Derek's business partner Phil Doherty. My mom's book club co-chair Karen. Half the women's auxiliary from First Methodist. Brooke in a white sundress. Derek in a navy blazer that probably cost more than my first car. Club's private dining room had dark green wallpaper, a chandelier the size of a small dining table, and a menu that was clearly trying to justify its prices. My mom stood up during dessert and tapped her wine glass with a butter knife. She said, I just want to say to my beautiful, smart daughter who is going to make such wonderful decisions for this family, happy almost birthday, Avery. We are so proud of you. 17 people raised 17 glasses. I raised mine. I smiled. I said, thank you, Mom. Derek caught my eye across the table. He tilted his wine glass toward me and mouthed, big day coming. I smiled back just enough. And then I noticed the man. Corner table on the far side of the room. Eating alone. Mid-50s, thin-framed glasses, a gray leather briefcase leaning against his chair leg. He looked up at the precise moment I was looking at him. He gave Derek a small, professional nod, barely visible. Derek returned it with a millimeter of movement, the way men acknowledge each other when they're trying not to be seen doing it. I didn't know his face. But I knew that briefcase. I had watched that exact briefcase come through our front door on Wednesday afternoons for months. Conrad Harmon was already at my birthday party. Several nights ahead of schedule. Waiting. Pastor Greg raised a toast to Grandpa Raymond's memory. I thanked him and drank my water. Your choice. Your life. I was counting down the hours. Midnight, June 3rd. My bedroom door was locked. The lamp on my desk was on. I was sitting in the chair I'd had since 7th grade, the one with the worn armrest, wearing an old sweatshirt and pajama pants. Glass of water on the desk. 3 sharpened pencils I never ended up touching. I wanted my signature to come from the version of me who had lived in this house every night. The girl who set the table without being asked and helped Brooke with her homework and said goodnight, Mom on the way up the stairs every single night even after she knew everything. At 11:51, Caldecott joined the video call. Silver hair, blue tie, the green lamp on his desk glowing behind him. At 11:53, the Cornerstone trustee joined, a woman named Sandra Park, a yellow legal pad in front of her, reading glasses pushed up on her head. She said, Happy almost birthday, Miss Cole. At 11:57, the online notary joined. Ohio licensed, camera on, identity verified. 11:59. Caldecott said, Ready, Avery? I said yes. Cursor blinked in the signature field. 12 o'clock and 1 second a.m. I typed my full legal name, Avery Marie Cole. Slowly. Every single letter placed on purpose. The notary confirmed. Sandra confirmed. Caldecott tracked the screen without blinking. At 12:03, Sandra said, Initiating asset transfer. 12:04 she said, transfer confirmed. The Louise Trust has received $742,318.60. Fully executed. Irrevocable. Caldecott looked directly into the camera. He said, "Happy birthday, Avery. The road ahead belongs to you." I realized I had been holding my breath for nearly 2 minutes. I let it out, a long, slow exhale that felt like something I had been carrying for years, not just months. I said, "Thank you." He said, "Get some sleep. I'll call at 9. Call ended. The screen went dark. Downstairs, the refrigerator hummed. The old house shifted and creaked the way it always did after midnight. I closed my laptop. For the first time in months, maybe the first time in years, I was just tired. Not braced. Not vigilant. Just plain, clean tired. I lay down. I slept. Pause. If someone in your life has ever slid a document in front of you and said don't worry about reading it, drop the word rooted in the comments right now. I want to know how many of us are out there. I read every single comment. 'Cause what comes next is not the ending. Not even a little bit. I still had to go downstairs the next morning. I still had to sit across from the woman who had spent months planning this. And she still believed, completely genuinely with every fiber, that she was going to win. June 4th, the morning of the folder. I was awake before my alarm at 6:50. I showered. I dried my hair all the way. I put on a soft blue linen shirt, Grandma Louise's favorite color, and dark jeans. I put on her small gold stud earrings. No makeup. I looked at myself in the mirror for a moment and said, out loud just to the room, "You're ready." I went downstairs. Kitchen smelled like waffles and fresh coffee and the particular kind of effort my mom put into mornings when something was scheduled. She was at the stove in her good weekend robe, hair pinned back. She turned when she heard my footsteps and opened both arms wide. "Happy birthday, baby girl." She hugged me 4 seconds longer than her hugs usually last. She smelled like vanilla lotion and hairspray. Over her shoulder, I could see the kitchen table. Plate of waffles with fresh strawberries. A small glass vase of grocery store daisies. Birthday candles. And right beside my mom's coffee mug, not hidden, not tucked away, just sitting there in plain sight, a manila folder with a cream-colored letterhead peeking out from beneath the edge. Derek was at the table in a polo shirt, scrolling his phone without looking up. Brooke was in the window chair with a bowl of cereal and her earbuds in. My mom said, Sit, Derek, light her candles." Derek pulled a lighter from his pocket. He lit 3 thin birthday candles pressed into the top waffle. He said 18. Just the word, like a punchline he'd been sitting on. My mom said, "Make a wish, Avery." I looked at the 3 little flames. I thought, I wish for Grandpa to know. I blew them out. My mom clapped. Brooke pulled one earbud out and said, "Happy birthday, Avery." She actually sounded like she meant it. I said, "Thanks, Brooke." I sat down. I picked up my fork. I took 2 bites of waffle. My mom folded her hands on the table the way she did at church board meetings right before she made a motion. She used her warmest voice, her women's auxiliary voice, and said, "Honey, now that you're officially a grown woman, there's something really important we need to talk through together. It's about Grandpa's money. It's about protecting this whole family." I set my fork down. I said, "Okay." She slid the folder across the table, traveled 4 inches and came to rest against my plate. She said, "It's not complicated at all. Just some paperwork our attorney put together so everyone can be smart and safe. It's really just about family protection," Derek said without looking up from his phone. "Its structure. That's all. And nobody's taking anything." I said, "Can I read it?" My mom said, "Of course, sweetheart. Take all the time you need." I opened the folder. Cover page, Cole Family Financial Integration Agreement. Avery Marie Cole, Principal Beneficiary. Below in smaller text, Diane Pruitt, successor co-trustee. Derek A. Pruitt, attorney in fact. My full legal name in 4 separate places on the first page alone. A signature line with Avery Marie Cole printed in neat block letters below it. And right beside it, a second signature line labeled parent or guardian signature. That line would only be needed if I were still legally a minor. I turned pages without hurrying. Page 2, durable financial power of attorney transferred to Diane Pruitt. Page 5, assignment of 58% of my beneficial interest to an entity called Pruitt Cole Family Holdings LLC. Page 7, co-trustee designation. Page 10, acknowledgement of family financial priorities, including Brooke Marie Pruitt's college tuition at Kenyon College. I checked the document footer. Generated, November 18th, Harmon Legal Group. November 18th, 7 months ago. While I was eating her pot roast and watching football on Sundays and thinking everything was just ordinary life. I closed the folder. Set it down. My mom said brightly, "It's so much simpler than it looks. Just a few signatures and we can get on with the actual birthday celebration." I said, "Mom, this document was drafted in November." She said, "Lawyers keep updated templates. That's totally normal." I said, "Templates don't include someone's middle name." I flipped back to the cover page. Pointed to my full name. Avery Marie Cole. I said, "This was written specifically about me. It's been specifically about me since November." She said, "Avery, honey." Derek cut in. "Sign the sticky pages. This really isn't complicated." I looked at him. I said, "Mom just said our attorney put this together. Can you tell me the attorney's name?" A pause. My mom said too quickly, "Someone we've been working with on financial planning." I said, "Is his name Conrad Harmon?" The silence in that kitchen was the loudest thing I have ever experienced. Derek's jaw went tight. Brooke reached up and pulled out her second earbud. My mom said very carefully, "Where did you hear that name?" I said, "He was at the country club the other night. Gray leather briefcase." "He nodded at you, Derek." Derek said, "That doesn't mean anything." I turned to page 10. I read it aloud slowly. Acknowledgement of family financial priorities, including college tuition assistance for Brooke Marie Pruitt at Kenyon College. I looked up at Brooke. She had gone completely still. I said, "So the entire purpose of this document was to pay for Brooke's school." Nobody said yes. Nobody said no. My mom said, "Avery, Brooke is your sister." I said, "She is. And I'm not angry at her." I looked directly at Brooke when I said it. "This isn't on you, Brooke." Brooke looked like she might be sick. Derek's voice dropped into his authoritative register. "Avery, stop stalling and sign the papers." I said, "Before I sign anything, I'd like to have our family attorney on the line. Just to explain the language to me." My mom said, "We don't need Caldecott here for this." I waited. Kitchen was absolutely still. I said, "Mom." "Just her name." Soft. I said, "I never told you who our family attorney was." She opened her mouth. She closed it. I said, "Not once. Not at this table, not in this house, not ever. His name has never been spoken in this home by me." She said quickly, "Your grandfather mentioned him once years ago. I just remembered." I said, "Grandpa's been gone for nearly 2 years." Brooke said quietly, "Wait, who is Caldecott?" Derek said, "Not now, Brooke." My phone, lying face up on the table beside my plate, lit up and vibrated. The screen read, "James Caldecott, ESQ, 9:15 a.m. All 3 of them looked at it. Nobody said a word for a full second. My mom said, "Don't answer that." I said, "I'm going to." Derek said louder, "Avery." I said, "I am sitting down, Derek." Even. Calm. The way you'd speak to someone who needed reminding of something simple. "This is our family attorney calling on my birthday." He has every right to be heard at this table. I looked at my mom. You invited 17 people to watch a birthday toast the other night. You can handle a phone call at breakfast. Press the green button. I pressed speaker. I set the phone down in the center of the table between the folder and the little vase of daisies. I said, Mr. Caldecott, you're on speaker. I'm at the kitchen table with my mother, Derek Pruitt, and my stepsister Brooke. His voice filled the room. Calm. Unhurried. The voice of a man who had stood in this exact moment in many kitchens before mine, and not once flinched. He said, Good morning, Avery. Happy birthday. I hope I'm not interrupting breakfast. I said just barely. He said, Good timing then. I wanted to formally confirm something for the record with witnesses present. I heard a page turn in his office. He said, Are you ready? I said yes. He said it clearly, unhurried, like a man reading a straightforward weather report. I'm calling to confirm that the asset transfer we discussed completed successfully at 12:04 this morning. The Louise Trust is fully funded and operational. Trustee of record is Cornerstone Trust Management in Columbus, Ohio. Transaction is legally irrevocable. Total funded amount, $742,318.60. The sound that happened in that kitchen was not a sound. It was the complete absence of sound. My mom's coffee mug hit the table as her hand let go of it. Derek's hands, which had been flat on the table, curled slowly into fists. Brooke whispered, What? Caldecott continued, warm as a fireplace on a January night. Cornerstone's annual management fee is 0.6%. Avery's fall tuition distribution for Ohio State has been pre-approved. Everything is in order. Derek said, What trust? Caldecott said, The Louise Trust, Mr. Pruitt. Named for Avery's late grandmother. Established at the stroke of midnight. My mom said, Avery. You didn't. I said, Mom. I did. Derek shoved back from the table halfway. He said, This is... Caldecott said pleasantly, Mr. Pruitt, I would strongly advise you not to finish that thought on an open line. Derek sat back down. Hard. I watched my mom's face move through 4 expressions in less than 3 seconds. Disbelief. Calculation. Fear. And then, slowly, like the last light leaving a room at the end of the day, something I had been waiting 18 years to see on her face. The expression that said, without any words at all, I have lost. Caldecott said, There are a few other things I'd like to state for the record while everyone is together. I said, Go ahead. He said, My office received a forwarded draft of a document originating from Harmon Legal Group in Springfield, titled the Cole Family Financial Integration Agreement. A former employee of that firm raised serious concerns and forwarded it through proper whistleblower channels. My mom said that would be privileged. Caldecott said, Work product prepared for a minor third-party beneficiary does not carry privilege in the way you're describing. The forwarding isn't the issue. The content is. He paused. Avery, can you describe what's in front of you? I said, a manila folder. Cole Family Financial Integration Agreement. 12 pages. Generated November 18th by Harmon Legal Group. He said yes. That document carries a signature line dated April 1st, 2 full months before Avery's 18th birthday, while she was legally a minor in Ohio. It also contains a co-signature line for a parent or guardian. That is not a template error. That is the entire mechanism. Signed before she turns 18, while her mother still holds legal authority. Brooke made a small sound I'd never heard from her before. Caldecott said, I want to be clear about 3 things for the record. He numbered them out loud, the way a man does when he's been doing this for 30 years and wants no room for misinterpretation. First, this document is not enforceable. As of 12:04 this morning, the assets it attempts to redirect are held by the Louise Trust. They are not Avery's to reassign to anyone. Second, The document was designed to be executed while Avery was still a minor. A parent co-signature was required. In Ohio, a legal guardian holds a fiduciary duty to act in the minor's best interest. Attempting to redirect a minor's inheritance into an LLC, specifically Pruitt Cole Family Holdings, registered in Ohio last October with Derek Allen Pruitt as sole member, is a breach of that duty. Third, I filed a formal complaint yesterday with the Ohio Supreme Court's Office of Disciplinary Counsel regarding Conrad Harmon's role in preparing this document series. Mr. Harmon has 2 prior bar reprimands. He was notified of this new complaint yesterday afternoon. Derek said, "You filed on Harmon." Caldecott said, "I did. And he is not the only one with potential exposure here, Mr. Pruitt." He let that sit in the room for a moment. A long, quiet moment. My mom said, "Please. Please stop." He said, "I'll leave the rest for another time." I said, "Mom, look at me." She looked up. Slow. Her eyes were red. The tears were real, I'll give her that. Her body could produce them on demand. But the script underneath those tears was one I had heard at 100 dinners, in 100 slightly different versions. She said, "After everything I've sacrificed for you, Avery. After everything I gave up, I let the wave roll through. I didn't interrupt it." Then, into the quiet after. I said, "Mom, I'd really like to talk about what sacrifice means with you, with a counselor, with someone neutral. A mediator. When we're both ready." She said, "I don't need a stranger involved in my relationship with my own daughter." I said, "I think we've needed one for a very long time." She cried harder. Derek put a hand on her shoulder. He was staring at the wall when he did it. Caldecott said, "Avery, your Aunt Jenna called me about 20 minutes ago. She's waiting at the end of your driveway." I stood up. I picked up the folder. I picked up my phone. I said, "Thank you for the waffles, Mom." I walked to the coat rack. I put on my jacket. I stepped into my sneakers. I walked down the hallway past the framed photos. Me and Brooke at Christmas, both of us squinting towards something off camera. My mom and Derek at the beach, tan and smiling. And near the bottom of the wall, in a smaller frame I had put up myself, my dad's face. His smile exactly the way I remembered it. I touched the edge of the frame as I passed. "The front door," I paused. I turned around one last time. Brooke was standing at the top of the stairs. Just her. Watching me with wide, still eyes. My mom had her face in both hands at the kitchen table. Derek was staring at the wall. I looked at Brooke. I said, "You didn't know the full picture." "I know that. Don't carry what isn't yours to carry. Text me when you're ready." She nodded. The smallest nod in the world. Like she was afraid too much movement would break something. I opened the front door. June sunlight, pale gold and honest, the kind that doesn't ask permission. Aunt Jenna's black Honda was idling at the end of the driveway. I could see her through the windshield, window rolled down, coffee cup in one hand, sunglasses already on. I walked down the driveway. I did not look back. Pause again. If you just unclenched your jaw reading that, drop a like right now. Truly helps more than you know. I thought walking out that door was the ending. I genuinely did. It wasn't even the halfway point. After. Aunt Jenna lived in a second-floor apartment in Cleveland's Ohio City neighborhood. A tall fiddle-leaf fig by the living room window that somehow thrived despite her schedule. A cat named Winston who regarded every visitor with deep, calibrated suspicion. A sectional couch that was too soft for your back and too comfortable to leave. Coffee table with a water ring she had long since made peace with. She said, "Shoes off. Tea now. Everything else can wait." I showered for 20 minutes. I changed into sweats she laid out for me. Then I turned my phone over on the counter. 53 missed calls. 69 texts. My mom. My mom. My mom again. Karen from the book club. Pastor Greg. My mom's sister in Dayton who I hadn't spoken to in 2 years. A neighbor from our street whose name I could barely place. Phil Doherty, Derek's business partner, who I had met exactly twice at company cookouts. Jenna walked in, looked over my shoulder at the screen and said, "Block them." I said, "All of them?" She said, "Every single one. James will tell you which ones to unblock when things settle. Tonight your only job is to sleep." I blocked 11 numbers. I put my phone on airplane mode. I drank the tea. Winston jumped up onto the cushion beside me, turned 3 slow circles, heaved a sigh and curled up against my leg like he'd taken a vote and decided I was acceptable. I slept for 11 hours straight. The deepest, most complete sleep I had gotten since I was 9 years old. What happened in Millhaven? Millhaven was a town of about 8,000 people, 2 Baptist churches, 1 Methodist, and approximately 4 opinions that everyone recycled in rotation. My mom went to First Methodist that Sunday. Navy dress. Cried during the prayer concerns portion of the service. Told the congregation that her daughter had gone through a difficult transition and asked for prayers for healing and reconciliation. Pastor Greg's wife, Marlene, had been at the country club dinner. She had heard Derek mouth "Big Day" coming across the table. She had heard my mom's toast about wonderful decisions for this family. On Sunday morning, Marlene did not hug my mother after the service. She went home and called Karen from the book club. By Wednesday, the story had moved through Millhaven's Women's Auxiliary the way small-town stories always travel, accurate in its bones, slightly wrong in its details, completely clear in its meaning. My mom quietly stepped back from her committee chairmanship. At Brooke's school, someone in the swim team group chat shared an article with no comment, teens who stood their ground against family financial manipulation. Nobody tagged Brooke directly. Nobody had to. The swim team captain, a junior named Izzy, sat with Brooke at lunch on Thursday and said, "That whole thing sounds genuinely messed up. For real." "You okay?" Brooke said. "I didn't know it was all of it." Izzy said, "Yeah. I actually believe you." In Millhaven, that was a verdict. Derek's business, Derek's commercial landscaping operation, had been held together with payment deferrals and optimism that was not backed by cash flow for roughly 14 months. He had been counting, not loosely but specifically and deliberately, on access to a significant portion of the trust to cover a line of credit that came due in June. On June 7th, First Consolidated Bank sent a formal notice about a past-due equipment lease, $9,500 by the following Friday. Derek had a plan for that money. That plan was now sitting in an irrevocable trust in Columbus with my name on it and nobody else's. Friday arrived. The $9,500 did not. The bank moved quickly. They called in liens on 2 of his commercial mowers and his company truck. The following Monday, a tow service came to his depot off Route 9. Derek stood in the parking lot and watched his truck go up on the ramp. He didn't say a word. My mom had co-signed the second mortgage on our Millhaven house when Derek's business needed capital 18 months earlier. Her name was on the papers. The papers did not care about anyone's feelings. She called a divorce attorney on a Tuesday, not Harmon, who was by that point not returning calls from anyone, a woman named Patricia Oakes out of Columbus. She filed for legal separation of finances on Thursday. Brooke's non-refundable deposit to Kenyon, $3,000, was gone. She called the admissions office. They were kind about it. They offered a 1-year deferral and a partial credit. Brooke enrolled at Ohio State Lima instead. In-state tuition. 83% cheaper than Kenyon. On a Saturday in late July, Derek moved out of the Millhaven house. He rented a room above a garage from someone he knew in Lancaster, Ohio. Not a house. Not a life. A room. None of that was something I did. I had simply declined to be their life raft. They had spent 7 months building a plan around the assumption that they could pull my water over to their side. When I didn't move, they found out their boat had been leaking the whole time. Conrad Harmon. Caldicott's complaint to the Ohio Supreme Court's Office of Disciplinary Counsel was filed in early June. The disciplinary process is generally slow. This one was not. The former Harmon paralegal gave a detailed sworn statement. 2 other former clients came forward independently, a widower from Springfield whose late wife's estate had been quietly funneled into a family LLC controlled by his son-in-law, and a retired schoolteacher from Dayton who had been asked to sign documents she didn't fully understand while recovering from knee surgery. The disciplinary board used one specific word, pattern. 8 weeks after Caldicott's filing, Conrad Harmon was suspended from the practice of law in the state of Ohio for 4 years. Upon any future reinstatement, he would face 2 additional years of court-supervised probation. He could not advise on trust documents. He could not touch an estate matter. He could not draft so much as a simple will. Columbus Dispatch ran 4 paragraphs on page B3. His photo. His firm's address. A brief summary of the findings. Caldicott forwarded me the article by email. No subject line. No message. Just the link. I wrote back, "Thank you." He replied 3 minutes later. 3 words, "Justice isn't loud." I saved that email. I still have it today. 'Cause those 3 words said something I needed to carry with me. You do not have to be loud to win. You do not have to tear anyone apart. You file the paperwork. You trust the process. You let the truth walk slowly toward daylight on its own time. And you let the people who tried to use you watch their own ceilings come down, brick by slow brick, without any help from you at all. Brooke. She texted me on a Tuesday afternoon in late August. I was at Jenna's kitchen table in Cleveland, working through Ohio State's orientation paperwork. Move-in weekend was 3 weeks out. Her text said, "I didn't know she wanted all of it. I thought it was just part of it for my tuition. I swear on everything I didn't ask her to do this." I read it 4 times. Jenna walked through the kitchen, saw my face, said simply, "Brooke?" I nodded. She said, "Take your time. Or don't. Either one is okay." I took 2 days. On Thursday evening I wrote back, "Brooke, I know. She told you what you needed to believe so you'd be cooperative on a specific morning. Planning was hers. You were sitting at the kitchen table eating cereal. You weren't behind the paperwork." 3 dots appeared. They stayed for a long time. Then, "I'm sorry." I wrote, "I know." Then, "I'm not cutting you off. I'm not available to be around your mom for a while, but I'm not cutting you off." She wrote, "Okay." I wrote, "Get settled at Lima. Text me when you're ready." I meant what I said about coffee. She wrote, "Okay, Avery." Then, after a long pause, "Thank you." I set my phone down on the table. I looked out at Jenna's fiddle-leaf figure. Jenna came in from the other room with 2 mugs and set one in front of me without a word. She said, "How's the kid doing?" I said, "Scared. Alone. She'll find her way." Jenna said, "You know that's not your responsibility." I said, "I know. But I can hold a door open." Jenna tapped her mug gently against mine. She said, "Your dad used to say things exactly like that. Almost word for word." I said, "Yeah." She said, "More than you know, Avery. You have so much of him in you." I held that. For a long, quiet minute I just held it. Ohio State. Move-in was a Saturday in late August, the kind of Ohio August where the air itself feels like a wet blanket and the back of your neck is sweating before you've even touched a box. Jenna drove 220 miles each way without being asked. We packed her Honda the night before, trunk first, then the back seat, a quilt, a canvas tote of books, a desk lamp that had been Grandpa Raymond's, and the walnut memory box in a padded case. The letter from inside it, folded soft from being handled so many times, rode in the glove compartment. My roommate's name was Priya. Tamil American from Cincinnati. Loud, generous laugh. Marigold yellow curtains she had sewn herself and brought rolled up in a paper tube. She hugged me 30 seconds after we met and said, "You're going to love this dorm. Our RA does a different themed dinner every 2 weeks." I said, "I'm Avery. Small town about an hour from here." She said, "I'm Priya. My parents think I'm pre-med. I'm actually going into philosophy. They don't know yet. Solidarity." I laughed, a real laugh from the chest, the kind that doesn't calculate itself first. Jenna caught my eye from across the room and smiled like she'd been waiting to see exactly that. We made my bed together. We hung Grandpa's desk lamp over the study corner. We went to dinner at an Italian place on High Street and Jenna insisted on paying and I said the Louise Trust was technically covering it and she said, "Let me have this one, Avery." When she dropped me back at the dorm entrance, she put one hand on my cheek, the way Grandma Louise used to, and said, "He would be so proud of you. I hope you know that." She drove away. I didn't turn back toward Millhaven. I turned toward the quad, lit up and buzzing with new people and open doors. I looked forward. 1 year later, June 3rd. Sullivan Library. 4th floor. My favorite window seat by the radiator that still clicked and groaned in June like it hadn't gotten the memo that winter was over. Courtyard below was soft and green. I'd had a developmental psychology exam that morning. My notes were closed. At 11:57 p.m., I opened my laptop. Cornerstone Trust Management, Quarterly Statement. The Louise Trust. Current value, $798,240.14. Return rate, 7.5% net of distributions. Distributions issued, fall and spring tuition, housing stipend, winter clothing grant. Next scheduled distribution, fall tuition, August. I scrolled to the bottom of the page. In small italics at the footer, Raymond and Louise Cole, originators of Corpus. I put my fingertips on the screen. On their names. Both of them there, together in small quiet letters. 12:01 a.m., exactly 1 year from the moment I had typed my own name in a locked bedroom in Millhaven, I closed the laptop. I sat in the window light for a while. Outside it was warm. Someone across the quad was playing music very faintly. I could hear laughter drifting up, June laughter, the kind that doesn't cost anything or owe anyone. I thought about Grandpa Raymond. His 8 words. Your choice. Your life. I believe in you. I thought about my mom. I genuinely hoped she was okay. Not in a heavy, complicated way. The way you hope a stranger you read about is okay, real but at a distance without debt attached to it. I thought about Brooke. She had texted me that morning, a photo of her dorm room at Ohio State Lima. Small, sunny, a string of warm lights above a desk she'd clearly just finished arranging exactly the way she wanted it. She'd written, "Coffee this summer? I'll drive to Columbus this time." I'd written back, "Deal. I know a good place on High Street." I gathered my things. I walked to the elevator. I rode down alone. I stepped outside into the warm June dark. I tilted my face up. I breathed out. I went home. You made it this far. Thank you. Genuinely. I know that wasn't a light thing to sit with. I know some of you heard your own kitchen in this story. Your own dinner table. Your own version of that folder. Drop one word in the comments, just one. What would you have done at midnight when the cursor was blinking? Signed. Waited. Walked. I read every comment. I answer the ones I can. If you want to hear the next part of this story, what Aunt Jenna finally told me about the night my dad was supposed to change his will, and the person who was in that room with him when he decided not to, it's linked directly below this video. You are not dramatic. You are paying attention. See you there.